Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to look at the latest from the live radar, run through the weather warnings. We do have a wind warning issued for Friday. We're expecting to see some really quite severe conditions through much of Friday, from thunderstorms, much hotter air, and there is the risk of some gusty winds in the west as this low pressure system moves in, engaging with that hot and humid air. So have a look at that wind warning, but also had a detailed look from the UKV, the WRF and the Icon run, looking at the precipitation through Friday. It's looking like we can see two batches of heavy rain and storms, one in the morning for southern areas and one more widespread through Friday evening. Not only are we seeing big thunderstorms on Friday, but we're going to be seeing a step change in those temperatures. Up from the low 20s, that best mid-20s we're seeing at the moment, more towards the mid-20s or even high 20s, maybe touching 30 degrees at times. And as we see on some of the longer range runs, we're seeing some more big plumes of heat potentially next week. There still is a lot of spread, some runs just going for more moderately warm or hot conditions. Other runs, like the ECMWF midnight run, did produce extremely hot conditions, perhaps even record-breaking upper air temperatures. Would that equate to record-breaking surface temperatures? We can't say for certain until it is, until that pattern is sort of confirmed, but would be an extremely hot air mass moving up from the south. So yes, very lively conditions through the end of this working week into the weekend, and it's going to continue into next week as well. So to remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. So do start on the live radar. You can see there's a few showers around at the moment, and actually the models were forecasting a little bit more shower activity through this afternoon, especially further southwards and eastwards, where there are a few convergence zones have been forecasted. However, we're not seeing anything too major right now. There's quite a few cumulus clouds building up and a few odd showers towards the Norwich area, but nothing major at this stage. Could still develop in the coming hours, but at the moment we're not seeing much. Further northwards, we've got a few showers across Scotland and the far north of England, but it's not too bad, and the temperatures are responding today. We're starting to see that warm up. Again, nothing particularly hot coming up from the south yet, but generally warmer air, with the temperatures now around average or slightly above average for many areas of England and Wales, with temperatures perhaps reaching as high as 25 or maybe even 26 degrees in a few spots. So much better than what we've had recently, but only much better temperatures, but it's widely dry as well. So feeling a lot better today, and we'll see similar conditions through tomorrow before the more unstable conditions do arrive for Friday, before things do improve a little bit on Saturday and Sunday. Maybe not as dry as today and tomorrow will be, but much higher temperatures and generally a proper summery feel. If you go over to the weather warnings, we'll be able to see there is a wind warning issued for Friday. It's for the far west of Wales. I do suspect, from the looks of the latest runs, we could see the rain or thunderstorm warning issued for other areas of England and Wales for the heavy precipitation that could be moving in. There is a lot of uncertainty whether we do actually see severe thunderstorms or whether we just see some torrential rainfall. It's very difficult to say from the looks of some of these precipitation charts. So some runs are just showing a large area of heavy rain, whereas some other runs are showing some big embedded thunderstorms. That's why I do think that the Met Office held off from updating and perhaps issuing a thunderstorm warning, and we'll have to see if they do issue one tomorrow, as the risk is there. Just the model's still a little bit unsure exactly how it will play out. But you can see through Friday from midnight until 6 p.m, a period of very strong easterly winds expected, sufficient to cause some impacts to travel and tourism, and it's wrapping around the small low pressure system that moves in and that engages the thunderstorms, especially in the afternoon and evening. Again, you can see 55 to 55 miles per hour, could see even 60 miles per hour in a few spots, and this may lead to difficult conditions for holiday traffic on Friday and could result in a few trees affecting some roads and railway lines. Temporary structures across campsites and outdoor events could be damaged. High likelihood, lower end of the impact matrix. So do have a look at the precipitation, and we'll also have a look at the wind gusts from the UKV here. You can see over the next 24 to 48 hours, not seeing much at all. You can see through this afternoon there were forecasted a few localised heavy showers around, I'm recording this, around 2 p.m, but we're not seeing those really. So actually pretty positive. There's a lot drier today. As we spread through Thursday, a pretty similar day, a few odd showers breaking out, but generally dry and sunny conditions, especially further eastwards. But into Friday, you can start to see the unstable air moving in from the west. Not only very hot air moving in, but as I said, much more lively, unstable conditions. Now, through Friday morning, this could be the first batch of heavy rain or thunderstorms. UKV definitely more on the side of thunderstorms, looking at the intensity within these showers and the nature of them forming very much an isolated cell before spreading outwards. That is very much indicative of heavy convective showers, and again, most likely thunderstorms with those darker reds appearing. So the first batch for the early hours of Friday morning, where we could see more torrential rain and thunderstorms through Friday afternoon into the evening. Initially just very heavy rain in the southwest, and then we could see thunderstorms trigger on the eastern and southern extent of this big weather front, engaging across the East Midlands, South East England, East Anglia. Now the UKV takes this large area of torrential rain and thunderstorms inland through Friday evening into early hours of Saturday. Some of the runs either have thunderstorms not engaging at all and just being a large area of pretty torrential rain, or have those thunderstorms perhaps engaging further eastwards towards coastal areas or even out into the North Sea. So this pattern is going to happen. Just exactly the positioning of the thunderstorms and whether they do trigger over land is the only thing that we're sort of debating at the moment. But through the rest of Saturday, UKV has those thunderstorms sort of losing their intensity a little bit through the early hours as they spread out to the North Sea, but could see some line convection appearing. We're still seeing some storm activity, but instead of being a larger area of storms, more in lines. As we develop into Saturday, you can see eventually the big weather front disappears, and instead we see a few odd showers through Saturday, but it's a much more pleasant day. Slightly cooler upper air temperatures do sweep in, unfortunately, which will mean the temperatures are not quite as high as they could have been if we maintain that hot air from Friday, but it will still be fairly pleasant with a lot of sunshine around. The upper air temperatures do start to rise through Sunday and into Monday, so we should expect conditions to improve. Maybe mid to high 20s is possible, but again, a few scattered showers. Now you can see the upper air temperatures climbing massively into Friday, and you can see that by Friday afternoon we're seeing upper air temperatures into the mid to high teens, maybe even touching 20 degrees across the far southeast when those thunderstorms really engage through early hours of Saturday. So this proper heat plume appearing within that weather front that is forming those thunderstorms. For upper air temperatures do drop off more towards average for the time of year before starting to rise on the back end of the weekend as the low teens air masses start to move up from the south. Not only is it going to be pretty hot, the dew point is going to be very high, which will make it feel quite sticky as well, especially into Friday. Look at the dew points in the afternoon around the low 20s, so very sticky, very humid conditions. Feel like we're in the tropics here. Also have a look at those wind gusts. You can see through Friday, very strong gusty winds associated with that low pressure system through early hours of Saturday appearing here. So very strong gusty winds initially through Friday, but actually the UKV is showing the strongest winds through the early hours of Saturday. So surprised to see that warning expire at 6 p.m. Maybe the latest run is slightly different than the run the UK Met Office issued their warning based on, so we could see that altered tomorrow as well. Now finally from the UKV, if we do look at the temperatures, you can see this afternoon widely low 20s, maybe touching the mid 20s, 25, 26. As we head into tomorrow, similar conditions again, top temperature around the 25 or 26, widely low 20s. Into Friday, we were seeing 30 degrees a couple of days ago, but those temperatures are a lot lower now. These are the raw temperatures. But remember, the temperatures are this low, or much lower than they were a day or so ago. It's because there's more thunderstorm activity and more cloud. So it's not going to make it feel a lot cooler. Yes, the raw temperatures may be max at 25 or 26, but the humidity is going to be a lot higher and it's going to feel a lot more sticky. So it will probably feel still like it is 30 degrees, even though the temperatures are a lot lower now because of the increased amount of storm activity and general rainfall. Into Saturday's temperatures will be even higher. Again, the upper temperatures are falling now, but could see 26 or 27 in the east. And that's because we're still seeing some lingering warmth in the atmosphere, and also because it's a lot drier with more sunshine around. Into Sunday, again, could see low to mid 20s quite widely, and those temperatures will start to nudge up even higher as we head into next week, with some runs indicating consecutive days of high 20s or even low 30s in some areas, but still need to pinpoint those upper air temperatures a little bit better. Now, if you look at some other short-range runs, looking at primarily precipitation charts, now you can see as we head through Friday, through the early morning, you can see the first batch of storm activity through southern England. Again, forming into a bit of a line here, maybe having the heaviest rain slightly further northwards through the early afternoon than the UKV was showing, but it is very similar. Through the evening, we see another band of heavy rain move in, and as I said, some runs triggering those thunderstorms further eastwards, and that's what the WRF does here. It triggers those thunderstorms later in the evening, through the early hours of Saturday instead of through Friday afternoon into the evening, so later in the day and much further eastwards with those intense thunderstorms breaking out across parts of perhaps London, Essex, Kent, clipping East Anglia. So WRF having still quite significant thunderstorm activity, but further eastwards, further towards coastal areas, with areas further westwards just seeing more heavy rain with the risk of maybe a few embedded thunderstorms for eventually it all clears through the early hours of Saturday with some torrential rain as those storms really take off into the North Seas. This is the sort of scenario where we could see a bit of storm activity over land, but the majority of heavy rain and storms in the east at least could be out in the North Sea. You can see very similar to the UKV, but slight positioning and intensity changes could mean those thunderstorms do develop elsewhere. If you look at the Icon run, firstly through Friday morning, very similar to the two other runs with significant storm activity through the morning. Eventually those storms dissipate and then we see some more very heavy rain and storm activity through early hours of Saturday or Friday evening. And again, similar to the WRF, the heavy thunderstorms are further eastwards. Unfortunately, due to the range, this is the European run of the Icon. Again, you can get different resolutions. This is more of a lower resolution Icon run, and you can see there's a lot more sort of noise here with the precipitation, but you can generally see where the very heavy pulses are. That's where the storm activity will be along the east coast with the main weather front further northwards and westwards. So a very soggy night for further northwards and westwards with the risk of big thunderstorms further southwards and eastwards, turning into a much more widespread event than we anticipated a couple of days ago, where we thought it could have been a plume of thunderstorms. Now it's turned into a large area of rain with thunderstorms on its eastern edge. Of course, still 48 hours away from those storms in the morning to early afternoon, and slightly longer for the evening storms, so things can still change, but I'm sure we'll have a much better idea of the exact pattern as we head into tomorrow, with the models starting to converge more on an exact sort of pattern. I'm sure if they do show those thunderstorms quite widely for eastern areas, I think we will see a thunderstorm warning issued. But not only have we got this thunderstorm risk over the next couple of days, but we do have the big plume of hot air that could arrive for next week. So if we do have a look at the GFS, you can see the high pressure building in at the moment, and that's giving the dry weather the next day or two. But this low moves in off the Atlantic with a smaller low pressure system developing for Friday into Saturday, and that gives the heavy rain and thunderstorm risk behind that big plume of hot air. Now the big plume of hot air gets shoved away, but hotter air returns once again. As we head into next week, a huge European high pressure system develops and we see big southerly winds develop, and most of northwest Europe is going to be baking hot. Wouldn't be surprised if we saw high 30s or even 40 degrees in a few spots. UK on the periphery of that extremely hot air, and it could just about nudge into our southeast corner. And on the GFS here, by next Monday, you can see all that extremely hot air through much of France. And if we do run it on, you can see the pressure pattern remains with fairly high pressure towards the UK. And that hot air is literally tens of miles away. You can see here, across the northern tip of France, we're up towards the 20-degree isotherm, and that engulfs much of Europe and could even climb slightly higher here to maybe even the low 20s at 850 HPA. The UK just about sees the 15-degree isotherm, maybe get towards the high teens, and that would give temperatures in the high 20s or even low 30s for eventually, right in the longer range, we actually see an even hotter plume, but associated with low pressure, so storms sweeping that hot air away. But look at the date, it's next Monday, or a week on Monday, in almost 2 weeks' time. So this would produce about a week of very hot and very dry conditions. Again, if we put on the 2 meter temperatures, we'll be able to see the midday temperatures here. And you can see by next Monday, we're looking at widely low to mid-20s. Much of Europe, though, getting into the 30s now. If we do progress to next Tuesday, more towards the high 20s, 26 or 27 degrees, mid-30s across parts of Europe. By next Wednesday, we're looking widely mid to high 20s. And again, these are midday temperatures. If we looked at 3 p.m, it'd be a degree or two higher. So when we're looking at top temperatures here at midday of 27 degrees, by 3 p.m, more likely 28 or 29. By Thursday, still very high, mid to high 20s, low 30s across Europe. And finally into Friday and the weekend, you can start to see it cooling down, and that will be because the low pressure is started to come in off the Atlantic. Still pretty hot through the weekend as we see a secondary plume of hot air before getting swept away. So the GFS not bringing us extreme heat, but bringing us perhaps 5 to maybe 7 days of widely mid to high 20s, and I think looking at that locally we would reach 30 degrees. But you can see how close the severely hot air is. Really is a matter of a few tens of miles just there across parts of northern France. The UK here, low to mid-teens. Northern France, around 20 degrees. That makes a huge difference, not only to the actual temperatures, but they feel like as well, as this will contain all that extreme humidity as well. We can see the dew points at this point. UK mid-teens, which is pretty high, but not 20 degrees, making it feel extremely oppressive across northern Europe. Now, the GFS is kind of in the middle ground. This is what I'd say is the most likely scenario for next week, because it's kind of the middle of what all the ensemble members and operational runs are showing. Now, the GEM is on the cooler end, and funnily enough, the ECMWF is off the scale heat. So if we run through the GM, you can see very similar pattern over the next sort of 3 or 4 days. Low pressure eventually running off the Atlantic, and we do see warm southerly winds next week. However, we don't fully get the high pressure in, so much of that hot air remains further southwards, more 50 to 100 miles further southwards across sort of area, getting towards sort of Paris, slightly northwards than that. So instead, we are in warm air, but not ridiculously hot air. That's more exclusively across northern France. And that continues all the way day to day 10. And because the high pressure is not further northwards, we don't see that low getting trapped across the Bay of Biscay, giving us storms by next weekend or in 10 days' time. Instead, this would give us perhaps even more prolonged warmer and drier weather, but just not quite as hot. So you can see here the midday temperatures more towards the mid to low 20s widely. So still warm, still really quite pleasant, still would be very sunny, but just not quite as hot. Whereas the ECMWF goes ridiculously hot. And this is the run that is showing record-breaking upper air temperatures, or potentially record-breaking upper air temperatures. Now, very similar pattern into the weekend, and as we start next week, we see the high pressure build in, but it builds slightly further northwards, and we do see the extremely hot air. Towards day 10, we do see the low pressure move in as well, towards next Friday or next Saturday in a bit over a week's time, and that would give severe storms. But if we run it back, you can see the severely hot air covers much of England here. The 20 degree isotherm gets in, and the low 20s gets into much of Europe. If you do the United Kingdom look, you can see we see the 22 degree isotherm into the southeast, maybe even the 23, and this is just a snapshot. It could locally be slightly higher. The temperature deviation is off the scale, 10 to 12 degrees plus above average. And if we did put on the 2 meter temperatures and run it back, you can see by next Monday we're looking at low 20s. Next Tuesday we're talking more mid 20s. Next Wednesday high 20s and low 30s by next Thursday, and then low 30s once again by next Friday, but more further eastwards. You can see the heat builds, and remember these are midday temperatures, so you can always add a couple of degrees. So by the end of this run, we're looking at mid 30s for the top temperatures, and the start of it we're looking at more high 20s, low 30s. Could be consecutive days there of very hot conditions, and yeah, extremely humid conditions as well. It would be ridiculously hot if this came off. But the big thing with that is the ensembles. Now, if we do look at the latest GFS ensembles, you can see we've got the spike in heat later this week, drops off towards the weekend, but still is above average and still fairly warm. For next week, we see another spike of heat, but most runs are going around average or slightly, going about 5 degrees above average, back towards the 15-degree point, which is widely mid to high 20s, and that's what the GFS does. GFS does hold that heat a bit longer than other runs towards next weekend, but you can see it is firmly within the pack of ensemble members. Just in the longer term and the day 10 and beyond, it doesn't drop off as quickly. There are other runs, though, that are extremely hot, like the ECMWF operational run, and some other runs in around 10 days' time that go much cooler. Equally, there is some precipitation spikes, not masses, but some, indicating there is the risk of low pressure around as well. The 2 meter temperatures associated with this, just on the upwards trend. You can see this upcoming Friday is very uncertain. Some runs still up into the mid-20s, others much lower, and I do think the lower runs are more likely now because of the increased precipitation and thunderstorm activity. But beyond that, even though the upper temperatures go down a little bit towards the weekend, it just ramps up, and by this time next week we could be looking at widely mid to high 20s just from the ensembles here. So locally could be higher, and if some of the hotter runs came off, even higher than that. The dew points as well are going to be very high. We're looking still widely mid-teens even into next week. Lesser dew points on some of the runs than we're going to see this Friday, so perhaps slightly less humid, but still fairly high dew points around the mid-teens. And finally, if we look at the ECMWF ensemble members, you can see perhaps even more severe runs appearing here. Big spike through Friday with very high precipitation amounts, and then as we head into next week, another big spike in around 6 or 7 days' time. Again, the ECMWF operational run off the scale. All runs are showing a bit of a spike, but others by around next sort of Friday time peter off. ECMWF and some other runs keep it even hotter before eventually dropping off into the longer term and increasing precipitation. So you can see from the latest runs, it's going to be a very lively next week to maybe as long as 10 days with big areas of rain and thunderstorms this Friday with a very humid feeling, and the temperatures just slowly ramping up throughout the next 5 days, perhaps peaking early to the middle of next week, with some of the more extreme runs showing low 30s, some of the cooler runs low 20s, and most likely somewhere in the middle. That's why I say mid to high 20s, like the GFS was showing, is probably the most likely scenario. But all options are still open, and there is still the risk of an extremely hot plume of air next week. So make sure you do stay tuned, as there is going to be some quite lively weather around. Whether it is just the heat or whether it is the big thunderstorms in your area, there's going to be stuff going on. So make sure you stay up to date with the videos, and of course I'll keep you up to date with the weather warnings, as I'm sure we'll see some weather warnings issued perhaps for those thunderstorms later this week. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.